Okay, so get this. Today we're diving into something pretty massive. It's the UN's 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And we're talking a deep, deep dive into the actual document. Not just the headlines everyone talks about.
Yeah, it's one of those things, right? Super important, but kind of easy to just like skim the surface.
Exactly. And we're all about getting to the real deal here. So whether you're like prepping for some big meeting, got to write a paper, or maybe you're just insanely curious about how the world plans to deal with stuff like poverty, inequality, climate change,
Yeah.
the big scary things.
Yeah, all the fun stuff.
Right. This is where they lay it all out. So they kick things off with this, honestly, kind of utopian vision in the preamble. 5 core elements are at the heart of it. And get this, they even call them the 5 Ps. People, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnership.
Catchy, eh? But I think it's more than just, a catchy phrase. I think those P's are there to show how connected all these challenges actually are. Because they are, right? Poverty, climate change, even something like a lack of education, they all kind of feed into each other.
It's true. It's like this giant, messy puzzle where you can't really fix one part without looking at all the others. And listen to this. They're talking about a world, get this, without poverty, hunger, or want. A world where everyone thrives.
And not just survives, right? It's about everyone having a real shot at reaching their full potential with dignity, equality, in a healthy environment. Pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah, totally. But, okay, how do we get there? That's what I want to know. From all this talk to actual change.
Right, and that's where the declaration comes in. This is where the rubber meets the road, as they say. And the big thing here, I think, is that 193 countries signed on to this agreement. So it's not just talk, it's a global commitment. They're putting their names on it.
Okay, so this is serious business then. And one thing that jumps out, at least to me, is the focus on gender equality. Like, they make it clear we're not going to hit any of these goals if we're leaving half the world behind.
Yeah, definitely. It's fundamental to everything else. Now, this 2030 agenda, it didn't just appear out of nowhere, of course.
Right, there's got to be some backstory here.
It builds on those Millennium Development Goals. Remember those?
Yeah.
Adopted way back in 2000.
Vaguely, yeah. Maybe refresh our memory a bit.
Sure. So those goals, they were very focused on things like reducing poverty and hunger, improving education and health, good stuff, essential stuff. And the 2030 agenda, it takes those successes as a starting point, but it goes much wider, much deeper. This time, they're tackling a whole broader range of issues. Social, economic, environmental, recognizing that they're all, again, interconnected.
Okay, so it's like they learned some lessons from the first round and said, let's get even more ambitious.
Exactly. It's about understanding that these issues don't exist in isolation, so our solutions can't either.
All right, so let's unpack this 2030 agenda a bit. We've all heard about the 17 Sustainable Development Goals.
The SDGs.
Yeah, the SDGs. Everyone's talking about them. But we're not going to bore you with a list of all 17, are we?
Definitely not. No way. I think it's more helpful to group them thematically, right? We're talking ending poverty, improving health and well-being, ensuring good education for everyone, making sure we have gender equality, taking climate action, and so on.
Right, so it's like organizing a giant to-do list for the entire planet.
Exactly.
And you know what I like? Each goal, it's not just this vague idea. They have these specific targets. It's not just let's end poverty, is let's reduce extreme poverty by X%,
Yeah.
actual measurable benchmarks.
Totally. And that's where things get really interesting when you start digging into the details. Like take goal 1, for instance, ending poverty. One of the targets they have is to reduce the transaction costs of something called migrant remittances to less than 3% by 2030.
Okay, remittance costs. I'm not sure everyone has that term in their back pocket. What are we talking about here?
Okay, picture this. You've got a family, maybe in rural Nepal, something like that. One parent gets a job in a wealthier country, sends money back home to support their family, right? Those are remittances, a lifeline for so many families. But sending that money, it's not free, right? Often comes with really high fees. And so reducing those fees means more of that money goes directly to families, helping them afford essentials, food, healthcare, education, all of that.
That's a detail I totally would have missed if I was just skimming the headlines. It's like this huge global goal suddenly becomes intensely personal and real. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And I think that's important to remember because as big and global as these goals are, they're ultimately about improving the lives of individuals.
It's amazing when you think about it. These huge goals, like moving money around the world,
Mhm.
but it can come down to helping just one family.
Absolutely. It's about understanding those connections, the global and the personal. And those specific targets, they're really full of surprises. Like goal 3, right? That's all about good health and well-being. You think, okay, diseases, maybe access to healthcare, but they have this target about having global deaths and injuries, get this, from road traffic accidents.
Oh, wow. Yet it's easy to forget about road safety when you're thinking about global health in those terms.
Right, but it's huge.
Uh,
Affects people everywhere.
yeah, for sure. And it just shows it's not just about like curing diseases, it's about creating a safer world overall. And here's
Sure.
another that caught my eye, talk about creating a different kind of world. Goal 11, sustainable cities. This one I love. They actually want everyone to have access to green public spaces.
Can you imagine? It would totally transform how we live in cities. More parks, community gardens, green roofs.
I mean, it just sounds nice, right?
Totally. But also think about it, a healthier city, a happier city, and not to mention as the planet heats up, a cooler city.
Oh, yeah, good point. Okay, so we've got all these amazing goals, very ambitious. But the 2030 agenda, it's not naive about the challenges, is it?
Definitely not. They get into that in the means of implementation section. This is where the, aspirations meet reality because they acknowledge it. Achieving these goals, this is going to take a massive effort. We need resources, serious resources, new technologies probably, and something they call capacity building, which basically means making sure everyone has the skills and knowledge to play their part.
Right, so it's not enough to just throw money at the problem. People need to be equipped to actually make a difference.
Exactly. And speaking of money, that's a big part of it too. They talk about the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, which focuses specifically on financing the SDGs. Because, yeah, good intentions, they don't pay the bills, unfortunately.
It's all about cold, hard cash.
Well, in a way, yeah. They've outlined all these strategies to get funds from everywhere. Governments, of course, that's a given. But also the private sector, international organizations, even individuals.
Wow, so it's like crowdfunding a better future for the whole world.
That's a great way to put it. And to make sure this isn't just a bunch of empty promises, they put a big emphasis on data and monitoring. This isn't one of those set it and forget it plans.
So how do they actually keep track of progress? I mean, we're talking about the entire planet here.
Yeah, it's a huge task. They use a whole bunch of indicators for each of the 17 goals. These indicators track all sorts of things, poverty rates, how many kids are going to school, carbon emissions, you name it.
So they're basically collecting data on everything.
Pretty much. Because they have to, right?
Yeah.
They need to be able to actually see how things are going, where they're succeeding, where the challenges are, and most importantly, making sure no one is being left behind.
So it's like having a global report card for sustainable development.
Yeah.
Are we passing? Needs improvement.
You got it. And the really cool thing about this data-driven approach, it lets them adjust along the way. If something's not working, they can course correct, try something new.
So it's a living, breathing plan, not just some dusty old document. That's actually kind of hopeful, isn't it?
I think so. It's a recognition that we're all learning as we go. There's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Right. And that's where things get interesting for all of us. Because the 2030 agenda, it doesn't just put all the responsibility on governments or the UN.
Exactly. This is where we come in.
Us regular folks.
Yep. Because the document is very clear. The future, it's in our hands. It's up to all of us, each and every one of us.
Okay, wait, so you're saying it's not enough to just like read this document and say, oh, that's nice, I hope it works out?
Not at all. It's a call to action for everyone.
But that can feel kind of daunting, right? I mean, how can my little choices really make a difference in these huge global issues?
It's easy to feel pretty powerless, honestly. It's easy to feel like one person. What can you even do? Right, exactly. It feels like, what's the point? But I think that's what's so interesting about the agenda. They know. They totally know it would be easy to feel that way, and they're like pushing back against it. They're saying, look, we know it's daunting, but even small actions, they add up.
Okay, I see what you mean.
If millions, billions of people make different choices, that's a ripple effect. That's how change happens.
Right, it's like they're not saying one person's going to single-handedly solve climate change.
Exactly. That's not the point.
It's more like everyone doing what they can.
Absolutely. It's about like taking a step back and asking yourself, what are you good at? What are you passionate about? Because there's a way to channel that into something that builds a better world, a more sustainable world, a fairer world.
So like, let's say you're amazing in the kitchen.
Yeah, you're like the leftover champion.
Exactly. Instead of tossing food, you find ways to use it, reduce waste. Or maybe you're like a social media whiz. You use your platform to talk about these goals, get people talking.
Totally. Or maybe education is your thing. You love teaching, so you volunteer, you teach kids about sustainability, about being a good global citizen.
Right. The possibilities are kind of endless when you think about it.
And that's what's so empowering, I think. Because it means we're not just along for the ride. We have a say in how this
We're not
goes.
just passive bystanders.
Exactly. We can make choices every day that contribute to a better future.
So there you have it, a real deep dive into the UN's 2030 agenda. It's ambitious, it's a call to action, but ultimately it's kind of a hopeful document,
Absolutely.
that says, hey, we're all in this together and we can actually do this.
And if you want to get into the nitty-gritty, really understand all the details, we highly recommend checking out the document itself. It's all there on the UN website. We'll put the link in the show notes for you.
It's a bit of a read, I'm not going to lie, but trust us, it's worth it. And who knows, you might just find your own reason, your own why for getting involved, for helping to create the kind of world we all want to live in. A fairer world, a more just world, a more sustainable world for everyone.